Hit the restart button. We're right there to recharge those batteries. We're here to help you. Restart, recharge. Restart, recharge.
Aloha, I am Katie Ritter.
And I'm Justin Thomas, and this is the Restart Recharge podcast, a podcast by coaches for coaches. We bring you tips and tricks to help you in your everyday work as an instructional technology coach or whatever they call you in your school district.
So hopefully you're going to leave us this episode feeling just a little bit less on your own coaching island.
And we are in the midst of a three-part series. This is episode 2 in that series. Planning a good, authentic PD can be difficult. So we're going to add on the layers of differentiation, personal choice, assessment, and alignment with the district initiatives to make this coaching skill even tougher to master. We're going to actually help you with that. This episode will explore the complicated art of differentiation for adult learning. Join us in exchanging ideas on differentiation in regard to pacing, mastery speeds, entry levels, content areas, and grade levels.
Yeah, and so I have the pleasure of introducing our first guest with us today, talking, Tracee Keough. You know her from a couple of episodes that she's been on, most recently episode 8. You may or may not have made it through that one because I goofed up the audio, so I would like to apologize to everyone, but Tracee's back with us better than ever before. Just to remind you about Tracee, she was a classroom teacher for 11 years before taking on the role of a technology integration coach for the last year and a half. She has taught 2nd grade, 5th through 8th grades, and the highlight of her career so far was teaching in the Innovation Academy, where students were in a personalized one-to-one learning environment where students could excel with online curriculum and hands-on learning. Currently, Tracee has coached in 2 different districts where both have multiple school buildings and are spread out amongst the area. As a coach, Tracee has worked with blended learning, hybrid schedules, virtual schedules, and face-to-face schedules, along with a fully virtual academy for one of the districts that she serves. So welcome back, Tracee, with your wealth of PD knowledge today. Thank you.
And back by popular demand is Brooke Conklin. You heard her on the last episode for our PD series, but in case you missed that one, Brooke Conklin is a technology coach here at Fort Edge, serving the pre-K to 12th grades in a Southwest Ohio region. Before entering the world of ed tech, Brooke taught 7th grade social studies. She is originally from Northwest Arkansas and has since settled in Liberty Township, Ohio with her husband, Alan, and 3 kids. Brooke's work as a teacher and technology coach is fueled by her love of empowering others to pursue their potential and dreams at full force. So welcome back, Brooke.
Thanks, Justin. Excited to be on the pod again.
Yeah, and you know what? It's my goal so that by the end of this series, everyone else is going to be calling you Brookie too.
Awesome. All right, so we will dive right into differentiation. And obviously this is something that we know as teachers. We use it a lot with our students, but what does differentiation look like for adult learners, and what considerations do you make as you plan for professional development?
So I am very excited for this podcast episode to get started, just because I think differentiation is one of those buzzwords that as educators and as a teacher myself, I tried to check the box on, but I think it's a skill that even as educators, it takes some really intentional practice to master. And it is so important, and it deserves a lot more talk beyond just the buzzword that we all make sure we lather our resumes with. So when we talk about differentiation for adult learners, differentiation is just making content different. And that's really just really simplistically how you can define what that buzzword means. So when we talk about adult learners and educators, we need to consider how educators are different in every single way when we think about differentiation. So they all have different entry levels. That's kind of the go-to thing to differentiate is entry levels. So when they start the PD session, what are educators entering with at their skill level? So entry levels, whether that's beginning with a skill, getting fluent and then just really advanced in it. But also educators are different in what they teach. So social studies educators are very different from unified arts educators, and math educators are different from administrators and admin assistants. So their application needs are different. Also, their preferred mode of learning is different. Some educators really enjoy videos that they can do on their own time and pause and rewind and learn in a non-pressured environment where everybody's seemingly moving ahead of them. Other educators like the live face-to-face interaction, the ability to learn hands-on and ask questions. So for adult learning, to answer your question, Justin, I would say just consider how your educators are different in every single way, not just skill level.
Anything to add on to that? That's something as a coach that we're focusing on as our team is, we're going to do some focus on andragogy, which is the process of like how adults learn, because I think to differentiate for adult learners, you have to understand how they all learn beyond just your knowledge of how you learn. And it's very different from pedagogy with when you're working with students. So really understanding the complexity to that piece will also add to your level of differentiation with your other educators.
Yeah, great points. All right, we're starting this episode off on fire, ladies.
Yeah.
So when we think about the sort of the traditional PD that has, we have all been shuttled into the library on the PD day, and we've all led PD where admin have shuttled all the teachers in to sit in our sessions, and more we're seeing that change a little bit, which is really exciting and a long time coming. But still, so often we put all teachers in a room together to go to the same sessions, which just like our teachers makes it really hard to differentiate for the learners that we have in the room. So what are you guys doing to make sure that everyone is walking away with the right knowledge and with something for them that they can take away, and then actually, like the golden nugget, actually go back and apply it to their classrooms?
So I will start by saying that my nightmare scenario was actually a reflection of this whole cattle shuttling into one big PD room. I was asked by administration, as was Katie before, to prepare a 1-hour PD for all of the unified arts teachers, including the gym teacher, the business teacher for the high school, the art teacher, the graphic design teacher, the music teachers, all going to be in one room, give them technology PD. And I think a lot of times as tech coaches, we're put in that situation where providing differentiated PD that meets not only the skill needs of each teacher in the room, but also the application needs of every teacher in the room seems like almost impossible. So in this situation, you really have to find ways to duplicate yourself as the instructor. So this can be through screencasts. It can be through providing different tasks or challenges based on who the educator, their department, their skill level is. So to give you an example of that particular situation and what I did that I think could translate to any PD that you did. We designed a unified arts playground. It was a Google site that had a Thing link embedded on the site. And if you aren't familiar with Thing link is, you can kind of think of like an interactive virtual poster board. So it was an image of a playground with hot spots on each area of the playground that when clicked on, gave a preview of a technology tool that then educators could decide if they wanted to explore more or if they wanted to move to a different area of the playground. When they clicked on that tech tool, that part of the playground, we'll use Flipgrid as an example. The teachers, then everybody in the room, if they clicked on that, they were taken to a separate page of the Google site that had a video that showed how to use Flipgrid, what Flipgrid was. It had text right beside the video that had the outline of what they would learn from the video. So it was multimodal. And then beyond that, I think what made it really powerful for differentiation based on content area and application need, was that it had examples for each area of the unified arts of how Flipgrid could be used for them. So whether you were an art teacher or you were the high school business teacher or you were the gym teacher, you learned about Flipgrid as a tool, but then you had actual examples for how that could be implemented in your content area. So even though I'm sure whenever they first saw that PD plan saying that they were all going to this hour-long tech PD, they were all rolling their eyes about yet another PD that doesn't apply to them. They all walked away with actual things that they could implement in their classroom.
Well, and that's a classic scenario too, Brooke, that I mean, you know, and no shade to any administrator on this, but it's very much like I had to focus on my core content teachers. We've got the outline for them and what they need to do. Oh yeah, I have all of these other teachers that don't fall under that bucket. What do? Shove them in this space while everyone else is doing this other thing. So I think a lot of tech coaches can relate to that. And, you know, those poor teachers that, you know, have to sit through those things that don't apply to them. So I think they were all very pleasantly surprised with what they walked away with that day, for sure.
I think on my side, it's more planning activities that are engaging and allow movement and conversation more for them to kind of realize how cross-curricular things can come. So the PE teacher can be working with the history teacher on, you know, American Revolution and the battles and the running and kind of incorporating all of those things and having open conversations and allowing them to get up and move around, because most teachers are not used to sitting still for long periods of time. So taking that into account when planning and differentiating, allowing for groups to move around and get into different spaces helps.
I love that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research. I'm not going to be able to like cite the stats, but there's a lot of research around like the importance of movement and getting the oxygen flowing, like blood and oxygen flowing back to your brain, and how much more it like lights up, even from moving like 2 minutes every hour, like how much that can do for you to like refocus you, get you re-engaged, and like how much more you remember just from those little breaks of movement.
And I think that's important because when you're on technology or having teachers on technology, it's a different type of learning in your brain versus like listening, reading, looking at a screen is a lot harder, and you can only sustain it for so long where you actually are having purpose. So making sure those breaks are embedded every 20, 30 minutes to give that chance to kind of get up, get things moving, talk about what you've been working on, to then come back to the technology will help kind of make things sink in more too.
Yeah, and back to Brooke's point about like the, you know, their preferred style of learning, right? Like some people are going to be able to just like sit and dive in for an entire 8-hour day and not know what hit them, and other people are going to lose their minds if they're just sitting there on a task. You know, teachers don't have, you know, adults don't have to do that very often anymore. So I think keeping that in mind too, I think is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And talking a little bit about the technology side of it for differentiation, we're going to ask you in just a moment to how you leverage your technology for supporting differentiation in your PD sessions. But first, let's listen into our sponsor break. Looking for a program that reaches all teachers in learning new tools to integrate in their lessons? Edu Badges is the answer. Edu is an anytime, anywhere badging program that is designed to take bite-sized tools for instruction and teach teachers how to use them. Edu has received the ISTE Seal of Alignment for educator standards, and each badge in our expanding library is aligned to the ISTE standards and the SAMR model. Learn more about the program that teachers call addicting at forward-edge.net/edubadges. Welcome back to the Restart Recharge podcast. We have Brooke, Conklin, Tracee, Keough. And before our break, we asked you, how do you leverage technology to support differentiation in your professional development session? So you talked a little bit about using some of that technology, but how do you leverage it a little bit more to support the differentiation?
I'm going to point this question to Tracee because Tracee is on our team really great at designing choice boards that allow for multiple entry points. So that's something I stole from her, but it's my go-to tool for differentiation. So I'll let her talk about that.
Yeah, choice boards are big for me because I'm not one that, and I always take it back to learning math, where in elementary school you were forced to learn it one way and had to show it one way. I failed math multiple times because I don't learn that way. So I don't expect other people to learn that way. So I want to give options and choice to kind of have them pop in where they feel comfortable. So I tend to build choice boards that are leveled. And I know Brooke and I have talked about this and really watching the language that you use on your choice boards instead of beginner, intermediate, advanced. Because you might come in as a teacher thinking you're advanced and realize this beginner skill is really where you should be. So making it more into a game board and a choice board where there's different levels and allowing teachers to kind of pop around and feel like they have that choice and they are accomplishing things that mean something to them. So that one's a big one. Just giving them, I don't care how you learn it or how you show it, just be able to get that information in there the best way that works for you. If it means creating a podcast or creating, writing it down in a journal, go for it. Other things that I know we have talked about are utilizing, like Brooke said, taking those choice boards and putting them into Google Sites or Google, Classrooms or your LMS to where they always have that resource to come back to. So it's not just a one-time seeing it thing. They always have the ability to come back and utilize that tool later after when they have time to digest the information and go back and see those things that maybe they need another refresher on, or harvest the idea and use it in their classroom, but at least they have a template. For me as a coach and an educator, it's always nice to have something to look at first and then kind of build my own off of. So that one's a big one. And then the last one that's really started playing into a lot of teachers as a coach is allowing sketchnoting. So whether it's on paper or digitally, having them draw out their thoughts, because we always forget there are those side of people that they learn best by drawing and doodling. There are those kids in your classroom that act like they're not paying attention, but the more they're doodling, the better they're retaining. So giving that outlet to teachers as another way to kind of bring in the learning.
Go ahead, Brooke.
Oh, I was just going to say, I will echo everything that Tracee said about choice boards. And one thing that she said that I want to make sure that gets reset, I guess, or that sticks with you. The way that Tracee designs choice boards, she creates entry points for everybody and they're leveled. So when a teacher comes into the session, they look at the choice board. A lot of them look like kind of a game board where it has like a path towards mastery. The teacher's not coming in and ambiguously thinking like, I'm not a techie teacher because I don't know any of the skills we're going to learn. The choice board and having it leveled where they can start at square one or they can skip to square four. It builds confidence in that it gives teachers a point on the board that says like, you're not already behind when you get here. Like there is a place for you to start and a place and a way for you to move forward in your learning and your mastery. So just one thing that Tracee does, I want to make sure that that gets repeated.
Yeah, and I'm going to build on that.
Yeah.
Because I also think it's a great way, and Tracee, you do a really nice job too. A lot of times she will use different colors that the teachers don't know like what level that is necessarily, but those colors, if you think back and if you didn't listen to the first series in our PD series that was released 2 weeks ago, please go back and listen because this will make more sense. But Brooke talked about that digital roadmap and really outlining the skills and what does mastery of this skill look like and working your way back. And putting all those tangible skills and things that teachers need to learn in those different places. So if you're just starting out, if you're middle of the road, and once you've mastered it, what does that look like? And tying in those choice boards, that's an easy way to pull that roadmap in so that you are aligning the skills within your differentiated session to the ultimate plan that you are doing there. And oftentimes those colors that you use kind of align to different places on the roadmap. And not that you always necessarily have to color it, but definitely pulling in those other resources. Don't forget about those. So those will break down the skills to help you from an entry level standpoint, like where are the teachers? And Brooke, I'm just going to tease it only because I want to make sure that you talk about this when we talk about like progress monitoring. But you did a really cool thing with a Google Classroom PD in knowing like where to assess and like a back end way of knowing like which level essentially the teachers were at. So I don't know if I want to make sure you talk about that, but I don't want to steal your thunder.
Sure.
So we'll get there, but I just want to put that little placeholder so we don't forget, just to kind of tie it in with the choice boards.
Yeah. Before we move on, to kind of elaborate on how we leverage technology to support differentiation, because it is so intimidating. It's intimidating for teachers. It's intimidating for us to have a room full of people that are all at different skill levels and we have to reach all of them. So things that I have done and that have become even more apparent in this last year is just duplicating yourself through screencasts. So you can embed a mixture of whole group instruction and then individualized instruction through screencasts in the same PD. So whether that's you have a small breakout group that you're working with live while your other participants are learning a more advanced element of whatever you're talking about through a screencast, or whether you have a whole group to introduce or to hook or to just warm people up to the content, and then you release everybody on screencast before you bring them back together to collaborate and share. Screencasting can be huge in duplicating yourself. Also, shout out to Pear Deck is a great way to make sure you're on top of how fast everyone is learning. Speed of mastery is another thing to be aware of in differentiation, because while two people may even enter your session at the same level, how quickly they pick things up throughout that 1 hour, 2 hour session could be vastly different. So Pear Deck allows you to do formative assessments throughout your session. So you can have teachers self-assess where they are at, report their comfort level to you, respond to questions. So you can quickly see which groups are getting it and which groups are not. And then that allows you to regroup, restructure. And then a second teaser to Katie's teaser, Google Form surveys can be a very quick way to pre-assess and I'm going to make up a word and say mid-assess, middle in between pre-assessment and post-assessment to make sure that you know where your teachers are at.
Put that
Love
in the
it.
dictionary.
Yeah, mid-assess.
Yeah.
Creating words here on the
Yeah.
Restart Recharge podcast.
Yeah, put that on your resume.
Yeah, I mid-assess. No, but Brooke, I like that too. And what you're saying about like thinking about those learners that are going to very quickly grasp like whatever content you are showing them, like in the group setting, I think is a great thing. I would always, like thinking about that too, like who do I know is going to come into this and already know these skills and be advanced, but they're being forced to sit in this session. So I always would utilize an LMS course so that I could always be sure, like whether it was a screencast, I wasn't necessarily doing as many screencasts then for that, but like finding other resources, articles, blogs, Tracee, to your point, other examples, like other similar sites, like maybe, you know, when I was asked to lead a session on Kahoot and teach, you know, there's a small group that they've already used Kahoot for 2 years and they're sick of it and they want something new. So I would point them like to quizzes or whatever else was out there to like give them something else to explore so that they could continue to learn. And then I would kind of put them in a small group off to the side, like here's the resources, explore on your own a little bit too. So not a fantastic example, but that was something else I did too.
Lisa on our team kind of does something similar. She provides the whole group with the whole PD plan at the start of the session. That way those PD teachers can work ahead if they're quickly getting it. They're not stuck at the pace of the room.
Yeah.
And I think on that whole note, utilizing your technology for extension activities, which is kind of what we're talking about. So if they're getting it faster, have that bubble of like, go do this now, instead of like continuing with us on a slower path, just giving them some branch out spaces.
Yeah. Love that. So thinking about kind of the opposite end of the spectrum. So we were just kind of talking about those people that get it really quickly and they move on and they're really advanced. But we know as tech coaches, for whatever reason, there is a level of anxiety around technology that makes, you know, I'm sure every single one of us has had multiple teachers say to us, I am literally the worst person with technology. I don't know how to use technology. I'm so bad at it, which is a whole nother maybe podcast episode that we could do about how to help support them. But when we think about those teachers who either have a lot of anxiety around using technology or just truly are really low skill in that one particular area, how do you use differentiation to support and model a respect for learning with those teachers?
I think for me, the biggest part of this is whenever those comments start coming up, I always add on, you're not there yet. Consistently, I always add that in so that they know like it will come. It might be slower than others, or your team might be going without you, but you're just not there yet. You'll get there. It's not as easy. It's like learning to ride a bike sometimes. It takes training wheels and it takes support. And I think that's a big part of like building in as a tech coach. How can I support you? What can I come in and help you co-teach with or co-plan so that they have that level of confidence when they get off on their own, and letting them know once they do accomplish that, like, look, you did it. Let's go back and reflect and what worked, what didn't work, and really building their confidence. It's a time as a coach to kind of step back and it's not about you in this moment or what you can offer them. It's about building up their confidence and level of understanding.
Oh, I love that so much. And Michael Roush on our team, he makes little yet stickers, like
yet.
yet ... and talks about the power of yet. And, you know, that's where the excitement is and like, what can you do and learn? And yeah, so I love that.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes comes from a student. It was last year, right before we left, and it was a first grader that was doing like this design thinking boat project. So they were having to create a model of a boat and get it to float out of like paper and popsicle sticks. I don't know. And this little kid, his little boat design was not great, but he looked at that little piece of trash and he said, you know, I don't think it's going to work, but I can always fix it. And it was just so sweet. So that's what I try to get out of teachers. And my goal in differentiating PD is that whenever teachers see my name next to a PD session, they know that they don't have to be super techie, that there's going to be a space for them in that room. One of the things that I did a lot in my first year and second year that I try not to, and Tracee talked about it a little bit, is I try to be very careful about how I name even groupings in my session. I have made so many PD sessions called Google Slides for beginners or Google Slides for advanced, or within my session, I have a choice board that's like beginner, moderate, advanced. And when a teacher walks into that space and they read what the skills are in the advanced or the beginner or the middle, it automatically puts a label on their skill level that might have a negative connotation. So if you're a teacher that's been teaching for 20 years, you never want to be in the beginner column of anything.
Mm-hmm.
So be careful about how you name sessions, like Tracee said, or your groupings. You can call it 101, 102, 103. Numbers are pretty neutral. You can call it toe in the water, waist high, all in. You can, if you're doing an early childhood session, you can do animal names for your groupings and still put the skills underneath so they know where they're at or what group that they should belong to. But I hear it anytime that I've done a beginner or labeled something beginner in a session. I have more times than not had a teacher say, I don't need the beginning group, I need the IEP group. And it breaks my heart. And it puts a negative connotation on those students. So I try to be very careful about labels and names and words that have connotations in sessions whenever I'm differentiating, so that everyone feels like their skill level is respectable, it's valued, they're not behind, they're just learning in a different spot.
Yeah.
No.
That'll get me on a whole nother soapbox.
Going off of that, we had a kind of a short conversation about something similar to that yesterday, but reminding teachers that learning is liquid, like it's not just one size fits all. And that reminding them kind of where they're at now is not where they're going to eventually end up being. So reminding them that their learning is liquid and will continue to kind of flow through the cracks and crevices that they need to build up.
That. Mm-hmm. You're always busting out the 1-2 punch phrases.
That one,
the harvesting, learning is liquid. Yeah.
I read learning is liquid from AJ Giuliani in his latest post. But I liked the way that it was phrased, that it just kind of like we put the pressures on for learning and standards and expectations instead of where are they at and how is it going to flow through to where they need to be. So
nice.
Awesome. Katie, you talked a little bit about this earlier. We're getting to it now.
Teaser.
It's come back now. How does data collection and progress monitoring factor into your professional development with your pre-assessments, your post-assessments, the newly founded mid-assessments?
Yeah. I would first like to say the only time data collection has been used with the phrase teaser and gets people hype is education. Anyway, so data collection is a super scary thing. and even like mentoring other coaches. I think we tend to scoot out of the room pretty quickly when the data collection talk starts, because it's hard to assess people's comfort and confidence and implementation. Those aren't as easy as a MAP score test or test score or whatever.
Sorry to cut you off, Brooke, but to build on that, I mean, we're also assessing change, right? I mean, so much of what we do as coaches isn't even just in that one skill level of like whatever the PD session is, but like is the culture changing? Like, are we changing instruction as a whole? Like that, to your point, is a very hard thing to assess for adults who don't have to take a state test every year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you listen to our podcast 2 weeks ago, we talked about like the goals that you can align your work with as a tech coach. So those big goals like community engagement, social emotional learning, it is so hard to assess if you're making change in those. So I think that to really keep momentum and to make sure that your work is given the time and the space by the decision makers in your district, it is very important to make sure that you are collecting data in some way. So the teaser, man, I hope this isn't a letdown. We really hyped it up.
I know, it won't be.
Okay, speaking of choice boards and differentiation in a PD, for Google Classroom, that was a big shift in the district I'm working with 2 years ago. We made the transition to a school-wide LMS, Google Classroom, and I think that sometimes administrators will say, do 2 sessions on Google Classroom, and then we expect teachers to just have it. So we've checked the box, we provided the PD, we're moving on. So
insert any tool.
Insert any tool, any strategy. Provide one PD on personalized learning, and we're ready. So I really wanted to show the scope of Google Classroom use, not only for admin, so they see that it's a very a tool that can be used very complexly and integrated very deeply in instruction, but also for teachers to show that there are multiple growth points. So whether you are starting day one, setting up your Google Classroom, or you're looking at how to differentiate for your own students within Google Classroom, do student self-paced learning in Google Classroom. I wanted there to be multiple starting points, and I wanted it to be something that teachers could access anytime, anywhere, because I knew that this wasn't a one and done day of instruction. So I used a template provided by our very own Tracee, and I made a Google Classroom game board that had 3 levels, and each square had a different skill. So setting up your Google Classroom, inviting students and parents or guardians to your Google Classroom, all the way down to personalized learning with Google Classroom. So each square on the game board was hyperlinked, and teachers could come in and they could pick which area they were in. They were color coded, each area, and labeled with toe in the water, waist high, all in. So they picked their starting square wherever they felt like they were beginning with Google Classroom. That took them to a separate page on a Google site that, similar to the Flipgrid example from earlier, had a video showing them how to do that very granular Google Classroom skill, some text, bullet pointed highlights of how to do it, and then a little challenge that prompted them to actually do it. So if they were watching the video on how to invite parents or guardians, then they needed to actually do that right then and there. Right below that, really the data collection piece that really made movement and for admin was a Google form that just simply said their name and which skill they had just completed, and they checked the box. They put a check mark that they had set up their Google Classroom, and then they sent it in. And so it was like 0 effort for the educator to complete this mid-assessment. And then on my end, what I did is I opened up a Google Sheet of those results, and I was actually able to sort, and I was able to present each administrative team with data that showed what percentage of their teachers were in the toe in the water category, which percentage of teachers were in the waist high. And I was actually able to even sort it by department because I put everybody's department by their name. So I could say the social studies department is all in. I think that they're okay for first quarter, but we might need to pay some special attention to the math department. And that opened admin's eyes to show that Google Classroom was not this one and done, learn how to do it, but how teachers were able to transform learning could be very complex with this tool. And it gave them very good insight into how far along we were in achieving that goal, and helped me advocate for more time with teachers too.
Which is like so phenomenally important, Brooke, that you not only use that data for yourself, but you had that conversation with the admin. I cannot tell you how many admin, back and again, we're kind of chuckling about it because we've all been there, but the admin are presented with so many other things that they have to do PD on, and we only have so much time in the year and things like that. So there's all of these time constraints. You're trying to figure out where this time is. And so often, I can't tell you how many admin I've had conversations with, building level, district level, and they think like, oh, we've had, Schoology or Google for 2-3 years now. Like, our teachers are fine. They know what they're doing. And come to find out, like, we're not trying to throw teachers under the bus, but it's like, we're in the classrooms more. And like, what they're doing is not, it's substitution type stuff that, like, great, they know how to upload a worksheet to Schoology and organize it in a folder, but we're not really like differentiating, or we're not really creating these like student mastery like pathways and the real deep things that these tools are embedded to be able to enable teachers to do in their instruction. So I just think having that very tangible way that was not like sit down and take this test, teachers, but it was just very naturally embedded in what you did. I think it's really important that you provided this aggregate data. So no teacher was like, no admin can go to a teacher and say like, we've been using this for 3 years. Why are you just now at the toe in the water stage, right? Because we want to keep that trust. But you were able to present it in a way that, just like you said, made them realize that this is not a one and done situation. And this is something that needs to be sustained support. So I cannot highlight enough like how critical that was, and like how we, for any big initiative or any like sustained tool, whatever it is, skill set like that, we need to try as coaches to figure out how to do that.
I'll just piggyback off of that when it comes to data, incorporating data pieces where teachers are self-reflecting as well, where they were at the beginning of the year, to the middle of the year, to the end of the year, and really gathering that data so that they can see their own growth. Because when you're living and breathing in the moment, you don't even realize that you're growing. Most people feel like they are jumping off the deep end and being eaten alive by sharks. So being able to show them that data at the end of the year and show them how much they grew from their own perspective, that is their values and opinions, not from you as a coach, from admin. It really helps them see their success in a different light. And I think that data is very important as well for teachers when you're differentiating out learning for them.
Yeah. And we build on how you did that, Tracee, because you mentioned like it's their opinions, like how are you going about like having those conversations, or just expand on that a little bit.
So just like Brooke, putting together a Google form that was very quick and easy to fill out for them, whether it was at the end of a session, a PD session, or in the example that I'm thinking of, the regular workshops that I was working with these teachers in, we were having them fill out this Google form to kind of place themselves on the scale of how did they feel in the SAMR model now? How did they feel with this tool at this point? So that they could really see their growth. And because they're so spaced out between the beginning of the year and the middle of the year and the end of the year, most of the time you've kind of forgotten where you put yourself at the other end of the spectrum, whether it's the middle of the year and you have August is a blur for most educators. So you're filling this out and like, yeah, I'm great at all of these. And then by the second one, you're like, they have time to reflect and kind of think, oh, so I'm not as good at this skill as I thought I was. I need to go back and kind of revisit this piece. But it brings in that differentiation when you as the coach are looking at the data to kind of say, okay, I need to step in and support a little bit more for this teacher, or this one thought they didn't have a clue, but really they are understanding it more than they expect at this point. So having that Google form that's easily accessible and valued to them because it's their own personal opinion. And again, not from a coach, not from an evaluation standpoint, helps them see that that information is important at the end of the year. And then combining all of those pieces together to put together a pretty little chart or graph or something to show them, you know, you have grown and it is important that you reflect, because that's one thing I think as educators for our own data, we don't ever do. It's very bottom of the list to do our own data.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Speaking of doing our own data, the other thing that I want to make sure that we don't miss out on is for differentiation. We can think we're doing the best job in the world and that we're reaching everybody, but we don't really know until we ask. So along with like gauging teachers' mastery and having them reflect on their own learning, it's also important to, at the end of PDs, ask very bluntly and honestly in a quick Google form, what did you think of the structure? Was this enough time? Did you like the format? And give a space for that feedback, because that can help you differentiate for future PD sessions too.
Yeah, excellent point. And I don't remember the episode number, but Tyler talked a lot about that on our May the 4th be with you, looking at the end of the year episode about like having to ask honestly and just like have conversations with teachers, survey collections, and really being able to collect that own data. So that's a super important point. So thanks for circling us around to that too, Brooke. And Tracee, I want to come back to you talking about like reflecting on the growth, because that's going to kind of lead into this next piece, and looking at bright spots with teachers. And our team likes to talk a lot about bright spots. And actually very timely, I was listening to a lecture for one of my classes today about like change management, and they were very much talking about like creating small wins, sharing those small wins, and how like we don't do that enough in our work, particularly in education along the way. So let's just take a little second right now, and if you would both share a bright spot with us from the year that you felt, well, I guess it doesn't have to necessarily be from this year, but share a bright spot from your own experience that you felt a PD session that you led or you participated in that really made a difference for all learners in the room.
So I had a couple come up when I was thinking about this question. One of them was a PD session that I ran in April of last year when the world was shutting down and people were in a panic mode. I had one teacher join the PD session that was kind of like everybody was grabbing at whatever they could get to help get them through. She got on, realized how much she wasn't understanding things, started crying on the live call with all of her colleagues, and ended up leaving the call. That is a teacher where, for differentiation purposes and just understanding, I reached out privately to her to make sure A, she was okay, and B, where she really was at and what she felt like she had accomplished or not accomplished, and got some of that feedback from her. And for differentiation on that one, it ended up being, we met regularly every Monday this school year. Fail not, she sent me a list on Monday morning of here's the things I need help with. And the majority of those things I could turn around in our meeting and say, you already know these 3 things. Let's refresh it, walk through it. You tell me how you get to this point. And the majority of the time she was able to do that and left every Monday like, this is how I want to start my week off, to feel confident and understand that I am doing what I know I can do. And I'm not the bottom of the barrel, that level 1 kind of entry point that she had grown so much over the year just by having that. She didn't need live group sessions. She needed that one-on-one 30 minutes just to feel like she was being heard. The second one was a PD session this school year, where we focused on using Jamboard for the middle school teachers and for the virtual learning academy specifically for them. And I just introduced Jamboard as a tool, like here's how it works across all content areas and special areas and how we can implement it, and had lots of conversations and breakout rooms. And I had one teacher who I met with pretty regularly at the end of the year say that was one of the best PD sessions she's ever been in, because she felt like she had time to really dive into the tool, understand it, and then create other ways that she can utilize it with her own students. So having that be feedback for me, where it was like the time we have to remember is really important for our teachers. It's not about what I can spill out to them, but giving them that time to actually practice and play, and how is it going to work in my classroom is really important to them, because they don't have enough of that.
I want to go to your PD sessions, Tracee.
Yeah.
I don't want to sit in the back and
Check your email.
Now I'm going to participate. I would say my bright spot is probably the example I gave earlier, just because it was so much of a challenge for me. That unified arts playground where I had the gym teacher and the art teacher and the choir teacher and the band teacher and the business teacher, whoever else doesn't teach a content area, come.
I had foreign language teachers too.
There we go.
Yeah.
All in one room. And the attitude when they came in the room, you could feel it, was like, not resentment towards me, but resentment that their time was about to be wasted again. It was like, I'm here to comply. I'll sit and listen for an hour, but I have things to do. And whenever we started that unified arts playground, it was so casual. It was like, here's a playground, here's a bunch of tech tools. I showed them how it worked. I showed them where they could find the specific examples for their content area, and they started digging around, and then before you knew it, they were moving their desks together to like play on tools together.
Oh, that's the best.
Yeah, and it was such a joyful, lighthearted PD session, and I had several of them come up afterwards and say that was the first relevant PD I've had ever, because so often they're thrown in with whatever content area has room. And so just to be able to, number one, spark that much joy in a PD session and turn the mood around so quickly, that was a bright spot. And then number two, just to provide something of value to people that have felt like they were never valued because of their content area before on PD days. That was a huge thing for differentiation for me.
I love it.
Yeah, both of those are really, well, four really awesome PDs that you guys have run. What are your top 2 tips to create differentiated learning, professional development for?
The biggest one for me is make it something that I would want to sit in. If I am bored, then I know who I'm talking to. They're just as bored, if not more. So I always kind of look at my PDs once I put them together and think, is this something I would want to sit through? Where can I add engagement and other pieces to make it more lively and fun? I've heard that said through multiple higher, much better PD presenters than myself, that it's like selling tickets to a show. Would you buy the ticket to the PD? If not, try again. And then I always stealing this from Katie over this last couple years. Always remind the group you're not the smartest person in the room, and that their feedback is valued and what they have to say is important during that PD session, because I am not the end all be all of all things technology. And I know that, so.
Very important.
I only have one tip, but I promise that I'll pack it full. I'll give you 2 tips worth in one. Okay, it's like a sale on the podcast today. So my tip is to never build a PD for the average learner. And I'm going to give a shout out to our team member, Michael Roush, because this comes from a story that he has told multiple times. And I don't know if he's shared on the podcast. I'm sure he will eventually, but so I'm not gonna steal his thunder, but average, we have this like misconception that average means you're going to reach the most people, but average doesn't mean most. Average means the central skill level in the room. So if you're only teaching to the central skill level in the room, you're not meeting needs on either side. You're not meeting the needs of teachers that are below that skill level or above that skill level. So in every PD session, don't try to teach what the average need is. Think about where every learner in the room is at and really stretch yourself to provide instruction that is relevant for every skill level, every content area, and every application need. So that is my one tip.
Well, those were 3 phenomenal tips. And I love that if that intrigued your mind with the whole average thing, read The End of Average. I think it's by Todd Rose. I can't remember. It's called The End of Average. It will totally blow your mind, and it's not written for education necessarily, but there's obviously so many applications to education, since everything we do is like, find the average. What's the average here, there, whatever. And after reading that, I hate the word average, because even average, you might not actually even have anyone who's even at that skill level or has that score. It's whatever. So anyway, not to go down a soapbox, but just a little recommendation.
A little recommendation there. And we have one final episode that's coming in our professional development series here. It's coming out 2 weeks, July 27th. It is PD That Sticks. So obviously a lasting PD that, you know, you'll be able to remember. And hopefully it was, you know, a really good professional development. Obviously, you two, I think, have given some lasting impressions on teachers that you have worked with. So that's coming out 2 weeks, July 27th.
Awesome. So we can't wait to wrap up this final series with you. And in the meantime, be sure to subscribe to Restart Recharge wherever you listen to podcasts at restartrechargepodcast.com. And if you would, we would be so appreciative if you would please rate and subscribe to the podcast. This will help other coaches and educators find the Restart Recharge podcast for coaches. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at RRCoachCast.
And we got a third episode coming in this PD series. I think we got a couple other great series planned, but we do want to hear from you. We want to know what are some of the topics on your mind. So if there's something, please, you know, once you've subscribed and rated us and everything like that, you can drop in a line. We like to say hello to you, and then you can tell us what is really on your mind. We would love to do an episode on it.
Yeah. And now it's time to press the restart button.
Recharge your coaching batteries and leave feeling equipped and inspired to coach fearlessly with the Restart Recharge podcast.
A Tech Coach Collective. We do need a little like ching.
We can make our own intro and everything.
Yeah.